Beneath the red robe, star-studded entrepreneur who is Hugh Hefner, there was an individual that strived to admit a classy, upscale, yet provocative 20th century lifestyle that immediately caught the public's attention. When the young and recently unemployed but yet ambitious Hugh Hefner published his first copy of Playboy, December 1st, 1953, the one with Marilyn Monroe on the cover, I doubt any sense of model railroading was running through his head, other than the occasional railroad worker and or passenger buying a copy of his newly published magazine from the newspaper stand at the local train station. Nevertheless, there have been many entrepreneurs involved in railroading. Well noted is Walt Disney, who made it a point, in fact start his newly found amusement park solely based around operating a 3-foot gauge, 5/8 scale railroad, and thanks to the help from Santa Fe, friends and investors, and a drive to bring joy through the entertainment of one of America's biggest companies, Disney. But back to the Playboy himself. Hugh Hefner was enamored with the 19th and 20th century lifestyle, and when one dives into the nostalgia of such an era, nothing fits better than trains. Especially a steam train. He's right about that. It was now the 1980s, and Hef was well settled into his second marriage with Kimberly Conrad. The couple had 2 boys, Marston and Cooper. I had the pleasure of speaking with Marston at a Playboy reunion in Los Angeles in 2018. But this was before any thought of owning one of the 2 Hefner family Christmas trains ever crossed my mind. Now before we dive into Hef's train sets and the mystery controller that came with this kit, you're probably asking yourself, how in the hell did this train dork ever get associated with Playboy? That's a very good question, train boy. You have some explaining to do. I'd like to introduce my wife, Charlotte. Before we met, Charlotte was part of the Playboy family. She knew Hef well, and would spend much of her 20s and early 30s at the Playboy mansion. In fact, we found a picture of her in front of the Hefner family's second Bachmann 10-wheeler passenger set taken in 2008. Charlotte mentioned that if Hef only knew when he was alive that her one request would be to take care of one of his train sets after his passing, that he would have probably just given it to her. Playboy was such a big part of her life that Charlotte and I also displayed Hef's train at our head table during our wedding. Hef was a very generous man who helped many people throughout his life. Back to the locomotive. I've been told for years that the Bachmann 10-wheeler is based around number 12, a 1026D class 460 10-wheeler type steam locomotive built by the Baldwin Locomotive Works in 1917. We've all spent hours, let alone years, running, kit bashing, and changing out the main drive gear that would always strip on the driving axle. If you're a Bachmann guy, you know what I mean. Yep, she's stripped all right. I know folks who own a graveyard of these locomotives, and when it comes to value, they're a dime a dozen. Not all, but most. What you trying to say? Hugh Hefner passed away September 27th, 2017. With his passing came an auction of some of the family's items. Charlotte and I watched as the family respectfully raised money for children in need through auctioning Hef's secondary belongings. My mind immediately went to train set. You see, every year at the mansion, the Playboy family would decorate an enormous Christmas tree, and what tree is complete without a train set? Now here's where it gets good for us train guys. There were 2, and only 2 train sets in the batch of items listed for auction. In fact, Hugh Hefner only had 2 train sets. One of them was a newer Bachmann Western set with a 10-wheeler, tender, combine, and coach, and the older set was the Royal Blue Bachmann set, complete with the locomotive, tender, combine, and coach. I'd often find myself at an early age looking up at the G-scale trains displayed at the San Antonio Hobby Shop in Mountain View, California. Now, I could never afford such beauties in the late 80s, but I'll always remember seeing the famous Royal Blue kit displayed 7 feet high in her brand new box. She seemed like a goddess that was untouchable. Now, most of us railroad guys know Bachmann is stuck with their 10-wheeler train set design with little variation since the release of their first Big Haulers battery-operated set back in 1988. Fast forward 30 years, and we find ourselves here at the Hefner family auction. I knew it was a long shot getting one of these train sets because items were going well over their market value, solely because they were Hef's. Makes sense. It seemed everybody wanted a piece of the Playboy himself. But the inner train guy in me went, they ain't touching that train, and I want the oldest one they have. The first of 2 Bachmann sets, the one Charlotte got a picture of at the mansion, came up, the Western-looking kit, and we found ourselves way over our head in bids. But the good news is it went to one of Charlotte's longtime friends, and she said we can absolutely document it and or take pictures anytime we'd like. She did mention about leaving it in her will to Charlotte as well. Awesome. So after the first train set came up and being outbid, an hour went by, and bam, the late 80s, early 90s Bachmann Royal Blue set came up. And I personally feel, in my opinion, this set fit his lifestyle the best. After all, It is called the Royal Blue. We played the bidding game and were in shock when the counter stopped and held onto our bid for the remaining minute. 60 seconds ticked by slower than a Bachmann 10-wheeler with a stripped drive gear. And just like that, the train set was ours.
You mean mine?
Hers. When the train set shipped, it was nicely packed with a box full of peanuts, along with a certificate of authenticity. When the box arrived, I couldn't wait. The set came with a locomotive, tender, combine, and coach, along with the original rusty Bachmann track. I quickly busted out my LGB track and controller and made a circle near my kitchen table. After inspecting the locomotive, I gave her a few quick shots of some long-needed 3-in-1 oil in and around her running gear. I also opened up the bottom and put a smidge of plastic-safe grease on her gears. To my astonishment, nothing was stripped. I put the classic 9-volt battery in her tender and plugged in my LGB transformer. From there, I gave the transformer a little bit of juice, and away she went. Now there's a mystery controller with this thing. I just can't figure it out. In fact, I could use your help. It clearly wasn't your average AC/DC single throttle Bachmann controller. This thing was homemade. In fact, it clearly shows the gadget pictured in the auction certificate. Now I want you to take a close look at this, and please help me figure out what this is. Please leave a comment below if you can identify the mystery controller, if in fact that's what it is. Like I said, this is the one piece I've drawn a blank on after getting to know this train set, and judging by the look of it, I wasn't about to plug it in. This being said, I had to know everything I could about Hef's Royal Blue Bachmann train set. Now this is the only picture I could find of the track set up underneath the tree when the family at the time took a photo with the kids. We're talking late 80s, early 90s. But this picture wasn't enough. Now how do I know in fact that this was the track that belonged to Hef's Royal Blue Bachmann train set? Specifically, this Royal Blue Bachmann train set. Good luck with that, son. I went to the source who knew everything about her father and single-handedly saved Playboy when the company, let's say, had their hand in too many pies. Hugh Hefner's daughter herself, Christy Hefner. What an amazing woman. In our short visit in 2024, I kindly asked her if she remembered her father's blue train set and showed her a picture of the track. She laughed and remembered they had to put the train behind the tree because it was too distracting for the boys in order to get a picture. Bingo. Now we're talking late 80s, early 90s here. We didn't have iPhones. We didn't have flip phones. We barely had pagers. By the time this specific train set was retired and the second Bachmann kit was up around the tree, iPhones were in their infancy, and people were taking pictures of pretty much everything. Social media was alive and well, thus the second Bachmann kit got a little more attention. As if that wasn't enough validation that this train in fact ran for years underneath the family's Christmas tree, I did a thorough investigation of the locomotive, tender, combine, and coach. I was blown away with what I found. There were a couple pieces of silver tinsel stuck between the axles and journal boxes of the train. She was definitely a Christmas train. Sure she wasn't a Halloween train? As I looked carefully at the beautiful stock Bachmann Royal Blue set, I couldn't help but wonder what this specific train set saw throughout his years at the mansion. Actors, models, celebrities, musicians, and astronauts would frequent the mansion. I enjoy hearing about the fun people Charlotte met throughout her years at the mansion as well, and can't help but gawk in the moment that we now own a little piece of Playboy's history. I even ran into a butler who said that Chevy Chase accidentally kicked over a car while putting an ornament he bought as a gift for Hef in the late 80s. I love hearing these fun stories, and can't thank the friends, family, and faculty enough for helping me better understand and get to know Hefner's Royal Blue Bachmann train set a little better. At the end of all this, I came to the conclusion that this kit was more than likely purchased and or gifted to Hugh Hefner in the late 80s and ran till probably about the late 90s. Tracks got rusty and she was more than likely retired and was replaced by the newer Bachmann Western kit, which ran from about 2000 to roughly 2012-ish. Nevertheless, I'm glad to have shared this fun adventure with you, the viewer. Thanks for joining me on this fun and historical journey. No matter how rich, poor, middle class, race, creed, color, and religion, that if you dig deep enough, you'll find a piece of railroad history in pretty much anything, no matter how big or small it may be. I'm going to leave you with a couple shots of the train going around in circles. Thanks again for tuning in, and always, keep steaming.